There's a little-known part of Hollywood that most people are not aware of, known as the audience test preview. The recently released book, Audienceology, reveals this for the first time. Our podcast series, Don't Kill the Messenger, brings this book to life, taking a peek behind the curtain. And now, join author and entertainment research expert, Kevin Goetz.
The purpose of my podcast is twofold. One, of course, is to pull back the curtain on little-known parts of filmmaking, the audience testing of movies, and entertainment research. The other part, though, is sharing conversations with my friends that I know in the industry so my listeners can learn from other elements of the business. Today, we're going to do both of these things. I have a very special treat for you today, a conversation with an icon. I first met Sharon Stone in the 90s through my husband. She's become one of my best friends. Both Neil and I are the godfathers of her children. We are an integral part of each other's lives, and we are the family that we have chosen for each other. You know, I always say there's a season, a reason, and a lifetime in friendships, and we are clearly a lifetime. I'm not going to give you her bio because her name is simply enough. Sharon, I love you. And I welcome you to a whole other part of my life, my podcast.
I'm thrilled.
I'm so glad you're here.
I always say there's a woman behind every man, and that's Neil. And I'm the other woman that's behind the both of you.
100%, without question. You know, when I was preparing for this, I'm thinking, what's the angle? We know so much about each other that it's odd to sit and have a conversation that is something that others don't know about. You know, so I'm thinking, what's the in?
Everything.
What's the in?
Well, when you started your business, there was so much resistance. When you left to start your own business, we had that phase.
We've had many phases.
Like when I met
years.
you through Neil, when Neil was still the head of creative advertising at Sony, and Neil and I were such good friends.
How did you meet again?
It was on a movie.
It was Gloria, wasn't it?
I think it was Gloria. We were doing the advertising for Gloria, and we met, and we were like Insta friends. We met, and it was one of those things where you meet someone, and it's like you've known them forever. And Neil is hilarious, and he is also so brilliant. And that's a combination that I really love. I love people who are really, really funny and really, really smart. And I also like people who aren't full of shit. And he doesn't take himself too seriously. And he is clever and does understand the dynamic of the business without being precious. And I love that about Neil.
He was also one of the only supporters. That movie was not getting great support within the studio, if I recall, at that time. Didn't they change directors or something? And
it was always Sidney Lumet, but Sidney was in a period of his life where he was quite difficult. He wanted to be on the 4:00 Long Island train and be done with his day. And it was a hard period. He was very cranky, and he wanted to rehearse all these scenes that were going to be in the streets of New York on a soundstage with tape on the floor. And that's a period that has really gone past. And we were eating up, studio money with this thing that I think everyone felt was a big waste of time. And then we were shooting in Harlem on Halloween day with a 9-year-old, and I was in 4-inch heels trying to carry a 9-year-old through the streets of Harlem on Halloween, which is a nightmare. It was a 3-ring circus.
of course, Jenna Rollins did the original, and I always loved Jenna Rollins. Happens to be one of Neil and my dear friends, and you did something very classy before you agreed to take the role.
Yes, I called and I asked her if she would have a meeting with me. And I asked her if she was comfortable with me remaking this film, because she's one of the greatest actresses that ever lived, and one of the actresses that I admire more than anyone. And also, she too is not full of beans.
Oh, no, she's not.
She's a really serious actress, and she and Cassavetes were really serious filmmakers, and they're not about all of their feelings and all of their tender ways you have to talk to them in order to make a project happen. They're just workers. So I went and I sat down with her because this was going to be to me, I was going to work with Lumet and we were going to make a serious film. That didn't really exactly happen because we didn't have the hours in the day to really make it.
But you did say to her, if you don't want me to do it,
I wasn't going to make it.
I wasn't going to make it.
No,
and isn't
because
that
there's
something?
no way I would disrespect her work. And I did feel in the end that the project did not wholly represent their good work. I was sorry that the film was not nearly as good as her version. It's really important to try to respect what they did.
When you started, and we didn't grow up as kids together, but knowing what I know about you from the girl from Meadville, Pennsylvania, who was really into books, essentially an introvert, and very heady and intellectual, to go into the field you ultimately chose has always seemed so kind of counterintuitive. What did it? Even to enter the Miss Crawford County pageant in the day, back when you were 17.
We were broke. And Miss Crawford County was a sub-pageant of the Miss America pageant. And by winning Miss Crawford County, I got a partial scholarship to college. And I also had an academic scholarship because I was going to college at age 15. So it really helped because my dad was a factory worker who worked swing shift an hour away from home. So this was a hard scrabble upbringing. My mom was an Avon lady, right? So we grew our own vegetables on our property, and he shot deer, and that's what we ate all winter, which I hate. And I ate a lot of rabbit.
Did they clean them?
Yes, that's what we had to do. And when
Did
I
you
would
learn
come
how
home
to do
from
it?
school, there was a deer gutted hanging on my swing set. And at, Thanksgiving, there'd be a big turkey pinned on the clothesline. And those are like probably 7 feet across with their wings spread out.
I just want to say that your dad taught both Neil and me how to shoot guns.
Yes, he did.
In Pennsylvania. And Neil turned out to be a damn good shot. I was less successful. I'm not going to lie to you, but Neil was pretty damn good. In fact, we kept a target in our library where we have Neil's beautiful shots and mine are somewhere off in the ether.
Right.
But those were such special times being with the family.
I mean, we grew up. I learned to shoot a gun when I was 5.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's how I, broke my clavicle from the recoil of the shotgun. My clavicle is like this from the shotgun.
And you learned all the safety. And
before I was allowed to drive.
All the kids, right? All the kids had to.
Before we were allowed to drive, we'd come down for breakfast and there'd be a handgun disassembled on our plate at breakfast. And we had to clean it and reassemble it.
Ooh, that's some serious stuff right there.
That's right, because you're driving a weapon.
Yeah, wow.
Was the lesson.
Wow.
So we had to be able to change the oil, the fan belt, and the tires before we were allowed to take the car out.
Okay, so I know I asked you this question, but you were doing an interview with Oprah, and I remember you called me the night of the interview to tell me that it went well, but you told me one particular story, and I remember adding to the story, and it has stuck with me because it was so upsetting and yet informative of who you are, who you became, okay? And the story was these little witches who were on the playground. You were about 7 years old, if I recall. You were reading a book and you were not popular. And these girls who were the popular girls came over to you at recess. And one of them walked over to you, the most popular, and you thought she was going to ask you to join them.
Oh, I was older.
Oh.
I was actually like in about the 5th grade.
So that would have been what, 9, 10?
9 or 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did she do?
I had like 2 of my friends were my friends, and I was shy, really shy. And there was this girl, she was like the queen of all the girls, there's the clique. And they're all
the mean girls.
Yeah, they're the pretty girls, let's be honest. And they're the popular girls, and they're the girls you always wish would like you. And they all floated over, and they were smiling and laughing, and I thought that they were going to talk to me. And the main girl stepped up. I was so like, it's the moment. And she slapped me across the face. And they all started laughing, and they walked away. And I was so stunned. And I went and sat against the school wall till recess was over. And then I went in the bathroom and her handprint was on my face. And I didn't want to go to class because I was so humiliated that her handprint was on my face. And so I hid in the bathroom for the rest of the day because her handprint was still on my face all day long. And it's kind of a thing because Hollywood is a lot like that. There's a lot of the club, and there's a lot of people who play with you all the time. And then when you don't give the right answer, you're sitting against the schoolyard wall. And then they're back in class making fun of you, and you're in there with a handprint on your face, and you don't know what happened. And it takes a long time to recognize that this is the unhealthy social aspect of life in general.
When we talked that evening, I remember saying something very, I don't know if you remember it, but I remember it really clearly because I felt it done to me. And that was that these girls tried to slap the different out of you.
Yes, they do. They do. They try to slap the different out of you.
And that, to me, was something so relatable. And so I go back to you with the original question of why do you go into acting where you're going to subject yourself to, yes, praise and of course ridicule and all sorts of other
Lots
things.
of ridicule, particularly in my case, because I really am the proverbial black sheep. I really am the proverbial dark horse because I know that it is the antisocial qualities that I have. It is the different thing about me that makes me special.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
I always said you were a character actress locked in a leading lady's body.
It is.
I've always said that.
It is so the truth about me. That's why the films like Casino or Basic Instinct or even The Muse are films that are so right for me.
Oh, no. How about Alpha Dog?
Alpha Dog was such a
That was
wonderful
transformative.
film.
How about Bobby?
Bobby, amazing. But these are also
Those are character roles.
Yes, but they're also you've got to think about who the directors were.
That's fair.
Right? We're looking at Cassavetes once again. We're looking at that familial understanding of work, right? When we look at the Muse, we're looking at Albert Brooks, who is about the work. He's not about anything else. When we look at a Casino, we're looking at Martin Scorcese. It's about the work. When we look at Basic Instinct, we're looking at Paul Verhoeven. It's about the work. When we look at people who are frivolous or superficial or ego tripping, they're not going to like me and they're not going to understand me and they're going to call me names because they're going to think that my thoughts and my ideas and my questions are about them.
Or their insecurities?
I don't know, but they're not going to think that they're about the work.
That's well put.
I remember sitting down with someone who said, I've written a part for you. And I said, okay. And they said, well, you don't sound very excited. And I said, well, I don't know what it is yet. And they were just so offended right off the bat that I didn't demonstrate exhilaration at the very thought. And I thought, well, I can't get excited until I know what it is because I won't know if I'm actually going to be able to give you what you would like to have from me.
Of course. It's ridiculous.
Because for me, it's about the work, not about my ego that's so thrilled that you wrote something with me in mind. Because I've seen a lot of that from top to bottom. And sometimes even the lower level things might be the better things.
Of course.
Because it's about if we can come together and create the work.
I don't think I've known you to ever, and I mean ever, I'm going to go on a limb here, say that you ever accepted a role for the money.
No.
It was always about, there was something in it. Now, it may not have come out the way you wanted it to.
No.
Thought it should have.
But people think when I ask for more money on things, because they want to say, well, she's just about the money.
I wish many of the actresses in Hollywood knew that often your request for other money was a statement of, pay me what you'd pay the other guy.
Exactly.
I mean, come on.
Because I will get a call that says, this is $100 million movie, and we're going to pay this leading man who, frankly, nobody's ever really heard of. $7 million, but we want to pay you to be the leading actress at $500,000. And I'll say, no, I made $500,000 on Basic Instinct 30 years ago.
Before you were famous.
And now I've done 100 films.
That's right.
So you're going to pay this unknown guy this out of a $100 million budget. I think instead you should probably pay us each 3.5.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's fair and reasonable. Because if I take it all over the country, it's going to be an event. And if I take it to other countries, it's going to be an event because people do know me. And
I say, sadly, there are actresses who we know who would be lining up to take that job. And that's not helping the situation. It's continuing.
It doesn't help across the board because what happens is we're getting studio executives that aren't educated in the process of filmmaking. They're educated in the process of budget making. Well, that's terrific for you, but in the end, somebody in this process has to have the fortitude to understand that people have to be educated in the process of film watching. Because people go to the movies for many reasons, but a lot of it is because they want to have a feeling with the people they're with in the movies. They want to be engaged with the people that they're sitting with. They don't go to be alone with the film. They go to be with the person that's sitting next to them with the film.
Yes.
And people that are doing the budgeting of the film have taken that piece of the experience out of their cognition of how films should be made. This is why the $40 to $60 million film isn't happening, because people have forgotten that people want to go with somebody and have a film experience. These $40 to $60 million erotic thrillers, romance, date movies, like that movie with Sydney Sweeney. Nobody wanted to pay attention to this movie, right? Perfect date movie.
Perfect.
Everybody.
And Glenn Powell.
And everybody.
And what a sexy combination.
Well, he's Top Gun, right? Like, I didn't even remember this kid's name. I saw him at the Vanity Fair party. I was like, Top Gun, get over here. Let's take a picture together, right?
Oh, I saw that picture.
Right?
It was wonderful.
Right, because he's devastatingly charismatic. She is absolutely adorable and sexy and talented. Put those two together on a date night movie. This is a winner. But these studio heads have forgotten why it's a winner.
Will Gluck knew. He was a guest on this podcast, Will Gluck, the director,
right,
who said exactly that. He said he knew by putting those two together.
Put it in the theater on Friday and Saturday nights. People want to go to the movies. They want to hold hands. They want to make out. They want to see, is your leg going to touch my leg? Are you going to drop popcorn in my lap? Uh-oh. I mean, let's not forget the real reason we go to movies, what movies are about.
Well, I hope young people do want to do that. I'm looking at two right here. I'm not sure. We did, because we had nowhere else to go.
But in the...
Escape from the Planet of the Apes, man, my 13th birthday.
But in the...
With pizza.
In this social media, we're going to cancel everybody if you breathe on me. Baloney, because we've all become so fragile that we can't talk to anybody or you're going to have a nervous breakdown. If someone holds your hand in the movie theater, are you going to cancel them? I mean, come on. We have to get back into an area where people are together again. And movies are part of that.
100%.
It's the way we learn to communicate with people. Remember Garbo Speaks? That tells everything. I went and saw your movies when I was pregnant and when I felt ugly and I cried with you and I laughed with you. You made me feel this way and you made me feel that way. That's what movies are for. And
you want to have somebody that's the conscience of that process.
Exactly, because intelligence isn't just intellectualism, it's emotional intelligence. And they have to meet. And that's not being a diva. And that's not being an icon. And that's not being a pain in the ass. That's being an artist at its highest form of efficiency and humanity and service to the public.
Yeah.
But the way we need to serve artists is that the organizers actually need to get organized. And the studio organizers need to remember why we're making films.
In the first place.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, I want to just go back to, you get the crown of Miss Crawford County. You then get discovered as a model by the great Eileen Ford, who actually invited you to
Well,
live with her,
actually,
didn't
Muhammad Ali was at the Miss Pennsylvania pageant. Because if you won Miss Crawford County, you went to Miss Pennsylvania.
she? And he saw you there.
Yeah, because it was in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and he was there on business.
No way.
So, of course, he went into the pageant because
He did.
And Ali called my dad.
I never knew this.
He called Joe. Joe never told you?
No.
Ali called my dad, and he said, Mr. Stone, I saw your daughter in the Miss Pennsylvania pageant, and I want her to be in the greatest. And my dad said, well, Mr. Ali, you know, Joe, it's how very nice of you to call, but my daughter is going to go back to college. My daughter's very intelligent, and she's going to get her college degree. She's not going to be in movies. And Ali said, you know, Mr. Stone, you could hide your daughter under a bushel basket, but she's still going to be a movie star.
Wow.
And Dad said, we'll see about that.
And then what happened?
Then Mom saw Wilhelmina and Eileen Ford were on the Merv Griffin show.
Oh, my God.
And that was when Mike got in trouble.
Mike, your brother?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was going to prison and just all hell was breaking loose everywhere. And it was such a dangerous time.
Early 70s, yeah.
For everybody in our family, and everything was so scary. They decided that they thought, finally, they didn't want to let me go because I was so young, that maybe it would be safer for me to go. And that's when they decided that I could go to New York. And
were you 16, 17?
When they finally let me go, I was about to turn 19.
So even though you could have left.
I was a junior in college, but you got to understand.
I know.
I hadn't even been on an escalator
This
until
is what I was
16.
trying to explain to our listeners earlier. You were this more introverted, book-reading, great student.
From a farming community. And like Danny Weaver, my best friend, who eventually produced Phil Donahue, got his driver's license, and we skipped school and went to Pittsburgh to ride the escalators when I was 16, because that was the biggest thing you could do. Right? We went in his Volkswagen Bug to Pittsburgh to ride the escalators.
Is that before or after you visited Spencer's Gifts?
Right? Exactly.
With the blue lights?
Yes.
Remember all and the psychedelic stuff in there? Oh, God. All right. So, so wait, you go to Eileen Ford first?
Well, I went first to Wilhelmina, but Wilhelmina had cancer.
Oh.
And she knew that she was going to die. She had already lost her hair. She was wearing a beautiful Hermes scarf on her head. She spent a long time talking to Mom. We went to see Eileen. Eileen wasn't nice. You know, Wilhelmina was really nice, but Eileen was tough as nails. She said, I'd like to throw you down the flight of stairs and bounce 10 pounds off your ass to start with. That was my hello.
Did she see you as doing runway?
No, because those girls, it was like the Pat Cleveland period.
How tall are you? You're
like 5'8.5", but that wasn't tall enough.
Wow.
And
you were also more shapely.
I took over Cheryl Teague's accounts because she did all the sportswear and the swimsuits. So I took over all those golf, tennis. I was a Charlie perfume girl.
This is at 19, 20, and 21, and you're making some money.
Yes. Oh, yes.
You're making some money. You lived with Eileen, though, at first, right?
I lived with one of the agents, not Eileen.
Oh, okay.
And then I was the Cole and Catalina swimsuit girl. I was Coppertone.
Oh.
You know, get a good reaction, show them a Coppertone tan commercial.
I still remember Jodie Foster's
Jodie's. And I did all these cosmetic ads. I did Coca-Cola, Diet Sprite commercials, and De Beers Diamonds, and tons of commercials. Clairol and Avon and Buff Puff. Every beauty contract you could possibly have, I had them all.
Wow. We'll be back in a moment with the great Sharon Stone.
Get a glimpse into a secret part of Hollywood that few are aware of and that filmmakers rarely talk about in the new book, Audienceology by Kevin Goetz. Each chapter is filled with never-before-revealed inside stories and interviews from famous studio chiefs, directors, producers, and movie stars, bringing the art and science of audienceology into focus. Audienceology, how moviegoers shape the films we love. From Tiller Press at Simon & Schuster. Available now.
We're back with my dear friend Sharon Stone. Sharon, when did you decide to move into, because I love your first role, it has to do with roller
acting.
skates.
Well, I made friends with this great extras casting agent named Ricardo Bertoni in New York. Ricardo had known Sly Stallone and had helped him get Rocky up and going.
Wow.
And Ricardo was really sweet to me and very dramatic. And he had called me one day because Julia Taylor
Was
casting
Woody's
for Woody. Mm-hmm.
casting director.
And said that Woody was casting this new film called Stardust Memories, and that he was going to see extras, and you go immediately.
Woody cast his extras. I was in Radio Days as an extra.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he cast his extras.
He cast all his own extras. And so come immediately. Now, this is before cell phones. You would call into your agency, or you would call into Ricardo, or you call in from a payphone.
or a pager. Beep, beep, beep. You knew something exciting was going to happen. I booked it,
your
or I'm on
pager
hold.
would come off. So I didn't have money, so I roller skated to everything. And that was my exercise. So I roller skated all over New York.
I would give money to see you roller skating on
Clunk,
3rd
clunk,
Avenue.
Clunk, clunk, clunk. And I was like 6'1" in
Where
roller
did you
skates.
live, by the way?
I lived
At that
in
point.
a 5th floor walk-up on Elizabeth and Houston first. Across from, there was a Texaco station there
Soho-y?
then. Like a block from CBGB's.
Oh, God. Okay.
Like really down, like above the Italian bakery for Rayo's. But it was great because they looked after me. Ray and his people really made sure I was safe coming and going.
So you go up to Woody Allen.
So I skated over to this, it was outdoors somewhere, almost like at a bus stop. And I got in this line and I had my huge modeling portfolio that I carried around with me. And I went in the line, I clomped up to the front of the line. And
With the roller skates.
Clomp,
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 clomp.
clomp, clomp.
This is where we had the very intricate Foley effects.
Oh, yes. And, the big wheels. And I get up there, I give the book, and then she turns around and she hands the book behind her.
Juliet?
Yeah. And it was Woody, and he was sitting in the bus stop, right?
Because he's probably shooting there that day or something, right?
Something.
Yeah.
And so he looks at my thing, and then he talks to her, and she says, Woody would like you to sit down next to him. Go in and sit down. So I go in, I sit down. I sit there and I don't say anything and he doesn't say anything. And I sit there for a certain amount of time and nothing happens. And eventually she says, okay, you can go. I think, all right. Now, over the many years, I've experienced a lot of this where the men that I'm working with on films will come in my trailer and sit down next to me, say nothing, do nothing. Hour goes by and they leave.
But are they just trying to gauge chemistry?
I never decide. I say nothing, I do nothing.
I say nothing, I do nothing.
Right.
Yeah. So you get the job.
Then I get called, you're going to be an extra, dress in all white, come down to this elementary school. We're using their cafeteria as the holding place. I come, and of course it's me, so I bring a giant bag of books with me because I'm going to be there all day, So I bring my books. I'm sitting there reading this book, and Michael Pizer, who was his AD at the time.
Oh, Michael Pizer,
Right?
great guy.
Right? Comes out, and he's like, there's a girl who was supposed to be in the film, and I forget what happened to her, but she didn't come. And there's a part that shoots today, and Woody wants to see you for it.
That wasn't the original one you went for?
No, I was just going to be an extra.
Oh.
And I said, okay, when? And he goes, now. He's going to come out and talk to you. And I'm like, okay. And time goes by, and he comes out, and he sits down next to me. And Woody's like, so what are you reading? I'm like, I'm reading this book. It's a children's book. It's about how to explain infinity to a child. And he's like, that's absolutely fascinating. And so we're looking at this book, and we're talking about infinity. And we had this 10-minute conversation about infinity and physics. And then he goes, okay. And he leaves. And then Pizer comes back and he goes, okay, it's time for you to get in hair and makeup. And I went back and they put me in that tight dress, and they were so nice to me, the hair and makeup people.
It was like 30s or 40s or something?
Yeah. And they put that real gardenia in my hair, and I had never even seen a real gardenia at this point in my life. And it smelled so beautiful, and they were so nice to me. And then I went to the set, and Gordon Willis shot everything imaginable. And I was just watching them, and it was unbelievable on this movie set. And they had this train, and they had all this stuff in a studio on a soundstage. And I was just like, come on, this was unbelievable. And I was sitting there, and I was having the time of my life. And so I was there for a few days, and then someone came and talked to me, and they said, look, they've seen the dailies. They can't pay you what you're making as a model. But Mr. Willis and Mr. Allen think that this is really where you belong on a movie set. And they'd like to ask you to stay for a couple of weeks. How would you feel about that? And I said, I feel great about it. And they said, they want to expand your part. Are you willing to do that? You won't make what you're making modeling. I said, I'm willing to do it. And thanks very much. And so they upped the part.
And it was a wave that is sort of famous, isn't it? That picture that...
Yeah, and the kiss on the window.
Yeah, the kiss on the window.
And then Pizer went on to a Claude Lelouch film with Jimmy Caan. And he called me one morning, and he's like, the girl that was supposed to do this part got stung in the face with a bee. Can you come over?
You're the freaking understudy that keeps going on.
And I was like, sure. And I took a shower, and I came over, and he goes, what took so long? Why did it take so long for you to get here? And I said, because I was in bed when you called me, and I had to take a shower. And he's like, get with it. And
this is Mike?
Yeah. And I was like, I'm with it. Are you kidding? I'm with it. And he's like, well, move it. And I was like, wait, I'm already wrong. What am I doing? And I went, and then I had got in bed with Jimmy, and the whole scene was me in bed with Jimmy. And he flirted with me like crazy, and I was like, keep it to yourself, pal. And we just got this repartee going.
Did you get on with him?
Like a house on fire. Because I was,
wonderful actor.
I have brothers. So him like flirting and goofing around with me, I'm not soft.
Right.
I know how to roll with a bunch of guys.
Sure.
And I'm not a,
wallflower.
Well, I know the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
I don't Me Too somebody for a misdemeanor.
Absolutely.
Like, I have a great sense of humor, and I actually enjoy the camaraderie. So we got along like a house on fire, and for his entire life, he looked after me.
Oh, well, that's where I want to go next. Listeners, thank you for joining me today for part 1 of Sharon's interview. We will continue our conversation on the next episode of Don't Kill the Messenger with the great and iconic Sharon Stone to find out when fame really took hold for her. Until then, I'm Kevin Goetz, and to you, our listeners, I appreciate you being part of the movie-making process. Your opinions matter.